will Congress vote to support the war past the 60 days or not? And that's going to be what all the politicking is about. Because if Congress doesn't give him that vote, then in theory, purportedly, he can't continue.
How far can a president go? What's the sort of legal ramifications of Trump? Can he declare war? Does he have to notify Congress? What does that notification have to look like? Those issues, I think both of us would say domestic law we're more concerned with. We both see the utility in keeping up with domestic law. So on that front, what do you think about, we're seeing some Democrats saying, look, Congress wasn't properly notified. This goes beyond the scope of sort of the war powers resolution. What do you think of that? What are the potential arguments there?
So maybe just backing up, I know if you guys watch this stream regularly, you actually probably already know about the War Powers Resolution. But just to explain how that works, the War Powers Resolution is a law that purportedly, and we're going to circle back to that big asterisk, purportedly limits the power of the president to use the military outside the formal declaration of war. And what it requires is if he thinks a war is coming, if he thinks military action is coming, he has to notify some portion of Congress, unclear how many. Traditionally, it's been the Gang of Eight, is what they're called. And then within 48 hours of hostilities starting, he has to give them a report. And then within 60 days, he loses authority automatically, unless Congress reauthorizes. That's how the law is supposed to work. So, to my knowledge, Trump did, in fact, notify the Gang of Eight. It might have been the Gang of Seven in this case, because I think somebody wasn't around, which is high-ranking members of Congress. You don't notify everybody, because it might leak. I don't know whether he's issued the report yet, or even if he really has to. He might still be within the 48-hour window at this point, or just on the edge of it. But I don't see why he wouldn't comply with that. He certainly should. It's kind of a layup. It doesn't have any teeth to it. But the thing you're talking about, Rob, the big one is, will Congress vote to support the war past the 60 days or not? And that's going to be what all the politicking is about. Because if Congress doesn't give him that vote, then in theory, purportedly, he can't continue.
Yeah, here's where all this gets weird, right? Let's run through this hypothetical scenario. Let's say Congress votes against it, and let's say Trump complies. Okay, we're gonna bring our ships back. We're gonna stop dropping bombs. And all of a sudden, there's a terror attack at a nightclub, and they say that was a radical Muslim on behalf of Iran. Does that then renew Trump saying, well, Iran still has sleeper cells. They are directly attacking the United States. Now I get to respond. And even though Congress just said you can't do this, this was an individual separate attack. I don't know. And the problem is, I think so much of this conflict, at least where we're likely to be hit, is non-conventional warfare. Like, I don't think anyone's there's always a risk of ICBMs, particularly hitting targets closer to Iran that are maybe U.S. interests. But as far as no one's expecting Iranian soldiers on the ground of the United States, what you're expecting is our interests being attacked abroad and terror attacks in the United States. Where does that rank on? Is this something that justifies the war power resolution? I don't know. I honestly don't know.
This is the thing, right? Like, if it expires, could he reinitiate instantly, right? Is there a cooling off period? I don't know. And by the way, when I say I don't know, I'm not being coy. I mean that I don't know, and anybody who tells you they do know is selling something.
Right.
Because there is absolutely no case law on this, and there never will be case law on this. Because the court, unless the court was going to say it's unconstitutional. But what the court's never going to do, the court's never going to jump in and say, we're taking control of the army from the president. Because the court knows that invites a constitutional crisis. It knows that the army will probably not follow the court and will follow the president in that circumstance as the commander in chief. So the court, this is a political question. This is a fight between Congress and the president for authority. So there is no case law. So I honestly don't know. And to make it even murkier, Rob, just to add even more gray to the gray area, ever since the War Powers Resolution was passed, every president who has complied with it, they notify Congress, they send the report. They always end the note or the report with the following: I am doing this because I want to. I do not think this is a constitutional law.
Right.
You do not have authority over me. I reserve all rights. You do not you do not have the power to limit me in this way. Signed the president, right? So no president of either party has thought this was a constitutional restriction. The court hasn't said anything, so we don't know. So would he stop on the dot at day 60? I don't know. No president has thought it's actually binding. But most of them have come up with creative ways around it. Like in the Obama years, he got very creative in saying, like, well, you authorized military force to go after people who did 9/11. And Al-Qaeda split into ISIS. And even though ISIS didn't exist at 9/11, I can use that to go after these new groups. And those new groups have gone to different countries. And yes, it's totally different people, but it's the same, so to get around the 60-day limit. So it could also be the case that Trump comes up with some kind of creative argument of this type. We'll see. But it's going to be an emerging issue, but it might be a dogfight.
So let me be clear. I think I'm less interventionist and less hawkish than you. So I'm not even saying this is a defense. I'm just trying to think through what the framers would have thought. Clearly, the framers wanted war to be declared by Congress, but they also left room for specific individual actions, like quick actions, quick responses. Congress sort of takes time. So that's why president, would be allowed to, for example, Barbary pirates, something like that. Yeah. Hey, you could issue something real quick.
Oh, and Rob, this is obvious, right? Could you imagine? They're like, okay, the Barbary pirates are landing on the beaches of New York and they're just hauling Americans into slavery and fucking taking them to the Middle East to sell them into slavery. And, Rob, you're like, Mr. President, you got to mobilize the Marines. You got to fight the pirates. And the president says, hold on. Congress hasn't declared war.
Right.
We got to let the pirates, take the people until Congress reconvenes. Now it's summer. Yeah. It's summer, Rob, and they've got a long horse ride. It's going to take a few months. Yeah. Like, obviously, the president has to have some inherent military authority.
Yes, and that makes sense. So what you would think back then, the majority of wars were more conventional. We declare war on the British. We declare war on the French, etc., right? Now that's not really how it is. So back then, let's say, like, even when the War Powers Resolution, which I'm not quite sure when it passed, but think of how that works. When was it?
73.
Okay, so
you're dead on. By the way, it was a response to the Korean War and the Vietnam War because those were wars without authorization and they were conventional. So it was designed to restrict that sort of thing.
Right, and that makes sense because in that it's like, well, the Koreans. Once we're like, okay, we're leaving Korea, we're leaving Vietnam. The chances of like the Vietnamese being like, well, now we're heading to fucking California. We're on the attack. Very low. Right? But that's not the case with like sort of war on terrorism. It's non-conventional, right? So let's say, I just don't know. Like if we would have left Vietnam, right? And Congress was said, that's it, no more Vietnam. And the president complies. And then all of a sudden, Vietnam unleashes a dirty bomb in New York City. Are we waiting until Congress reconvenes and be like, well, we already said that the president, of course not. The president's going to jump right in. And in this situation, it seems unless Iran's military capabilities are totally wiped out, they're going to keep lashing out. They're going to lash out with their missiles and stuff, and they're going to lash out with non-conventional warfare, with sleeper cells and things of that nature. So it makes it so difficult because I can already see what would happen if, and that's a big if Congress would convene and say no, right? They would vote against this. It's going to be really hard because any sort of Islamic terror attack on the U.S. or any U.S. interest, the Trump administration is going to be like, well, this is a proxy of Iran. Right? So look, they just scrap what Congress just said. This is a brand new attack. We have the right as the executive to respond and to preempt more attacks like this. We'll talk to you in 60 days. So at this point, it almost seems like, I don't know. I don't envision a world where Congress really has teeth to be like, that's it. No more dropping of bombs by Trump, because even if it's illegitimate, even if Trump's team's lying, it's going to be too easy to be like, there are non-conventional attacks that are coming as we speak. That gives us the right to respond.
Well, particularly with this nation, right? Because like, if there was, God forbid, an Islamic terrorist attack, and then like me with no intelligence, I'm just sitting here and I'm like, Iran probably funded it. I've got like an 85% chance of being right. This is the truth. Like Iran is a hostile nation. They kidnapped Americans back in the 70s. Remember the hostage crisis? They tried to assassinate Trump. Like this is a nation that has been overtly hostile to America for a long time. So the odds of them actually, being engaged or involved in such an act, pretty high. So it's a credible, even now sitting here with no evidence, it's as a hypothetical, it's credible. But I'll tell you another thing, Rob, to even expand on your point. Back in the area of Korean War and the Vietnam War, 60 days was a real limit, right? Like, what could you do in 60 days? You couldn't invade a country in 60 days. Boots on the ground. You had to get the ships over there, right? Trump, I mean, he deposed Maduro in like 6 hours, right? His estimate is 4 or 5 weeks. Now, maybe this gets dragged out, but like with what we've shown the world, which if I was a enemy nation, I'd be terrified of. We've shown the world that we have the combination of military dominance, technological air dominance, and cutting edge intelligent assets. And we can talk about that more because that's an interesting one. That we are able to surgically remove the leadership of a hostile nation before they can respond. We've done it twice now. Look, call me an optimist, but we might be done before 60 days is over.
Yeah.
And then what does the War Powers Resolution do?
Yeah, it remains to be seen. I think that it's fair to say at this point. Well, first off, it reminded me, it's funny talking about the hostages in the 70s. Let us not forget, I did look up the date. In the waning week of the Obama administration, remember they kidnapped like 10 U.S. sailors? Mm-hmm. And there was the video of them holding them at gunpoint, and the United States declared that it was a violation of international law, which no one really gave a shit. So, and then if you're to believe what we're told, now listen, someone like me might be distrusting of the establishment on both the Republican and Democrat side, but for the sakes of like sort of the legality of it, like Republicans and Democrats agreeing on that Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, right? This would come from the mouth of Chuck Schumer as likely as it would Mitch McConnell or Lindsey Graham.
That's not even a debatable point. That is simply like established fact. So like who funded Hamas? Who funded Hezbollah? Who funded the fucking Houthi pirates that were blowing up the shipping lanes a lot?
Israel! Don't you know anything? Yeah. It's all Israel!
It's an op. It's an op. Israel was funding Iran because Israel knew that the money would go to the Houthi pirates. It was all part of the plan. These are like, I'm not trying to like oversimplify this, but like on some level, you do need to realize, and maybe you can share a screen because I think this is helpful. You have to realize that like these are bad guys. And maybe you're not into this strike, you're not into this conflict. I understand that. But don't be Miss Tlaib here, right? Like both the US and genocidal Israel don't care about the laws. This is who they are. She's a sitting congresswoman. And she is referring to America as a hostile, genocidal nation. And look, she doesn't like Israel. A lot of people don't like Israel. That's all right. You don't have to like Israel. But you can't forget which team you're playing for. You're on the red, white, and blue team, right? That like you can be opposed to intervention. You can be opposed to helping Israel. These are all valid policy decisions. But you can't let that turn into, I'm opposed to America, which is, I think, a line that I've seen overtly. I mean, to me, like when I go on X, and maybe I get a lot of flack because I'm more of an interventionist, but I've seen like, that communist rag Jacobin.
Yes.
Jacobin's like, oh my God, look how awful America is. And it's like, you know what? If I'm pissing off Jacobin, that's a point in my favor.
Right.
Like, that's a sign that maybe something good is happening because I'm not saying you have to love this, but you do have to recognize that the kind of like global communist America should no longer be a powerful nation. We hate America. It's a bad country. It should sit down and shut up and become a second world nation. That crowd is furious about this happening. And that's a good thing because they're wrong.
So here's where I'll say from a legal perspective, and you see if you agree with me. Right now, I don't think there's any sort of case that Trump violated any domestic law. No. Right? I think that he'll easily be able to say the War Powers Resolution gives him the right to do this. By the time we get to 60 days, we have no proof that they would vote against this. And even if they did, it might be over or there could be an attack. So the legal case is against this. both internationally and domestically, is incredibly flimsy. That doesn't mean that you can't say there's a moral case against this, there's a political case against. Those are all better positions. We're just talking about from the legal perspective, both internationally and with domestic law. I don't think that's the best avenue if you don't like this to attack it from.
No.
Because it, and look, here's the other thing. At the end of the day, it doesn't even matter. At this point, things are so out of hand when it comes to politics in this country. I mean, you could just impeach Trump anyways and say that you think it was illegal and the details would be irrelevant. Doesn't matter. If there's a political will to hate this enough, if they wanted to impeach, they could, right? It really doesn't matter at this point what the letter of the law says when it comes to what the teeth would be. And the teeth are political repercussions. Trump's side losing in the midterms, Trump losing support, etc. That's where the real offense against Trump would be, not some nebulous claim that this somehow violates international or domestic law.
You're 100% right, Rob. And it's going to get dressed up in that language. And the reason it's going to get dressed up in that language, and again, I understand not everybody here is going to agree with me. I'm not going to convince everybody. That's fine. But you need to understand that the attacks from the right are going to be very, very helpful for the people on the left who want to use this to galvanize a political attack against Trump and to spur impeachment, to spur the midterms, these sorts of things, right? And it is totally fine to disagree with your party, with your president. Like that's all fine. I just urge you to disagree constructively and to say, well, I'm delighted to voice my opposition to this, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to, join. Like the line between like the people who were marching and they're saying, "Oh, I'm not pro Hamas, I'm pro Palestine," right? Well, they're all pro Iran now, and Iran funded Hamas. So like you got to understand what the connection there is, right? There is a team that is being formed, and it's going to be politically weaponized against the president in the immediate future. And maybe that's okay with you. Maybe it's not. I'm not telling you how to weight your moral compass, but that's going to be what the stakes are going to be in the coming months.